That title is a bit of a misnomer. Everything I'm going to talk about in this video are things that people are absolutely talking about, but I don't think there's big enough topics. In this video today, I want to leverage my platform to discuss features that I've compiled by combing through the community, asking discords, asking streams, etc. These features or requests are minor tweaks of the game that would hopefully lead to a better presentation, but in my typical fashion of upfronting the knowledge of my videos, you can find the entire list of what I'm bringing up in this video below. We'll be talking about PvP, the perk and mastery system, spending armory data and requisition on more things, the list goes on. But if you want to take a look at the chapters in the timeline in the description, see if anything there piques your interest and go ahead and jump to that part of the video. If nothing jumps out at you, then please feel free to shut the video down and get back to enjoying Space Marine 2. I know the title was clickbaity, but I wanted to be transparent up front about everything I'll be covering so you can decide if it's worth your time. I unfortunately am shackled to a toxic algorithm, so I try to combat that here with the TLDW first. If you are heading out and you found this video helpful, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe, as each one of those things helps me out in a huge way. And lastly, I stream this game as well as plenty of others on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So click the link in my description and swing on by. But let's get started here on the issues no one is talking about in Space Marine 2. Loading into the game, one of the first things I want to talk about is the difficulty. Now, it has nothing to do with the actual difficulty itself, but one of the things I think is really hindering people's experience of the game, or at least their enjoyment, is by jumping up to difficulties that their character isn't necessarily ready for. Every single one of these difficulties has a recommended level. Level 1, 5, 10, 15, and then 25. I think that going forward, what I'd like to see here is a literal lock on these. You cannot progress or play on that difficulty until your character has actually gotten to that level. Maybe this doesn't make sense to have it for every single character, right? Like, okay, I've got a level 25 Vanguard. It's not my first rodeo. I'm okay to jump into maybe a substantial with a level 1 character. But I think what's hindering a lot of online experience in my own kind of jumping in with randos is that we'll go ahead and play substantials, ruthless, or lethal with characters that are vastly underleveled for it. And it's very unlikely that they're playing with a weapon that is leveled up as well, right? Like if you're jumping in as a level 1 tack on a ruthless or a lethal, you probably do not have a relic weapon to your name. You might have a relic chainsword and you might have a relic bolt pistol, but you most certainly don't have a relic primary if it's not the melta gun, right? So I think that's a good restriction for the game. Only for public games. For private games with your friends, or maybe you want to like get power leveled by someone, yeah, just do that in a private game. Lock the lobby, make it a private game, and boom, you can play whatever difficulty you want at whatever level. That way, if you found a solid group to play with and you're always playing together, that way when you jump in, hey, my friends are going to carry me. They're both level 25. We're going to do a lethal or a ruthless. My character's level 5. Cool, go, have at it. But if you're jumping online, I think it's cheating some of the experience for people because they are jumping in at level 20 or 25 or 15, and they're playing with someone that is in single digits on one of the top 3 difficulties. I think that's something that's hindering both balance of the game because you can't get good feedback as a developer from people that are like, you know what, ruthless is too goddamn hard. What level are you? 5. Well, it's going to be that way. So I think that throttling people for at least their very first character on public only game matches is a good step. On private, have at it, go crazy. But that's a change I would make to make it so that we don't get such a wild perception of how these difficulties are actually shaking out. On that note too, I think we finally need the ability to queue up as a class and have that be locked in, right? How many of us have said, you know what, I want to level up my sniper, so I'm going to queue up as a sniper. And you jump in to play a sniper and it asks you to choose a new class because there's already a sniper on board. Or maybe it asks you to choose a new class anyway, and then there's just 2 of that class, whatever it is. I think if you queue up as that class, that's the class you play as. You don't jump onto the ship to have to switch your class. I think that is a huge issue that a lot of people are having when this game already has so many loading screens just to get into the game. You're jumping in, you're doing this, okay, great. Now I can't play the class I want to play. Now I have to leave and go back to the lobby. Trying to reduce the amount of loading screens we have to go through as a player, I think would greatly increase the player experience. So they're not just simply frustrated saying, well, okay, I've just gone through 3 matches of trying to play sniper and I don't want to do it, or I can't do it, and it's the only class I need to level up still. Things like that, I think, especially as we start to get towards this like long end of the content where people are starting to push through most of their things being maxed out, or a lot of their stuff being maxed out, they're going to start experiencing a strong overlap with the characters they want to play. And even further on that note, there should be an option just to random, hey, let me flex. Okay, there's 6 slots. I'll press random. So whatever one's open, I'll go into it. Cool. I don't really care. I just want to play the game. That I think can also be a great way too to go about this as well. Like, yeah, I don't care. Just playing, just having fun. But that brings me to another point, and it's about weapons and requisition and armory data. So when we take a look at our weapons across all of our characters, some weapons are shared, right? Like stuff like the bolt carbine is shared, or the melta gun is shared, the chain sword, the bolt pistol is shared across all 6 classes. But what I think is a big issue here is you kind of get a bit of a pump and dump. Maybe that's not the sentence I want to go with, but you get the situation where, okay, I hit a class level 25. It's time to switch classes or switch weapons I want to use. And a problem that I'm seeing is once you get a weapon, here, let me just equip this. Once you get a weapon to 17,000 experience to get into Relic, it's technically wasted experience because we don't get anything for completing this bar. And there are a lot of other weapons that we want to push to that max level. So we're going to switch to another one. And what I think is it creates this kind of crappy gameplay loop where you end up playing a gun that you really like to swap off to another one just to level it up to see if you like it because it's only good at Relic, and you have to now play as a max level character with a low level gun. Part of the game right now is grind, so I understand that. And I think a lot of this is going to be taken care of with prestige classes, which we'll talk about later in this video. But my problem right now is as a player who's got almost all of his characters maxed out, I'm now going to run into an issue where leveling up guns is not going to be as fun for me because I have to do it in lower difficulties if I'm not playing with friends. If I'm playing with friends, no big deal, right? I can just kind of get carried through. So what I would like to see, currently right now, we don't have a means to dump our armory data or our requisition once we've reached a max of those things. So I'm almost maxed on requisition. I spent it on something. I don't have any guns to buy, so I have to wait until I can level something up to buy it to then spend the requisition. But I'll hit the cap and I'm not going to get any more. I'd like to be able to use requisition to allocate it towards weapon experience. Maybe it's a lot, right? Maybe it's like, okay, 500 requisition gets you, I'm throwing blanket numbers out here, like 2,000 weapon experience, whatever it is. Something like that, so that I can push through the weapons I actually don't want to level the first 3 tiers of, and I can just jump into the weapons I want to play on that tier. Or maybe it's armory data instead. You can actually use, like, okay, so right now, if I want to go from standard to mastercrafted, I have to use a mastercrafted armory data. Well, what if I used an artificer or relic armory data to jump a tier? Again, that could be really blown out of control, and that's really not a very balanced approach. But my point is, give me something to dump my requisition and my armory data into, because you're going to start running out of those things until the next thing of cosmetics come out, right? When the Dark Angels come out, I'm going to be able to spend my requisition, no problem. But there will be a dirge in between those moments. Now, another suggestion here is to earn armory experience. So my tactical has his level, and then maybe he has a experience bar that is a currency that he can use towards weapons. So, okay, maybe I want to just play with the bolt rifle, and I'm loving playing with the bolt rifle, and this is a big thing. It's really enjoyable, blah, 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 blah. Because I don't really want to level up the auto bolt rifle from absolute 0 to relic, because I don't want to jump down in difficulties. Well, give me an armory experience bar, and I can say, okay, I've compiled 4,000 experience in this generic armory data experience bar. Let me just go ahead and hold down left click. It populates this entire tier with the data required, so 1,500 experience. I'm sorry, the experience required. Okay, well, let's just jump to Artificer. Okay, I just happen to have an extra 7,500 experience. Hold down this bar, boom, it populates this one, and we're up another tier. This way, I can play classes I've maxed out, on weapons I've maxed out, on lethal, for example, and actually get a reward towards other things I want to play as. Right now, there's no real reward for playing lethal once you've unlocked the cosmetics for it. You're not going to want to play it with a weapon that's not leveled up. Yeah, you can. It's a great way to get that thing leveled because 3,800 experience. But the point still is that it'll get throttled. If I was using a standard weapon, it would throttle itself. I would get 3,800 experience, but I wouldn't be able to allocate all of it. And then the same thing here as I would kind of push through this. So it becomes frustrating. Give me an overall bar or give me a spillover, whatever it is, so I can better allocate all my resources to leveling up the weapons I actually don't want to level up through the bottom portions of the game as a level 1. Now, another point about weapons here is that we need more options other than fencing for defense. There's no reason to use anything other than fencing. It's really not overall worth it. Yes, you can go with the balanced weapons on a Vanguard and take advantage of this, that, and another when it comes to perks, but fencing now has a special parry window, right? The parry window activates the second you press the button versus it having to do its animation. There's just no risk reward worth the reward of working the risk of moving off of fencing. It needs to be blown out of proportion, I think. Like, okay, here's the block weapon for the Thunderhammer, which is supposed to be like the alpha of melee weapons, right? Okay, well, fencing's 10.5 versus this is 12. It's really not that big of a jump, and cleaving potential only jumps up by 2. I think block needs to be just huge. This needs to be like a 15 or a 16. So if I'm using it, I'm getting the white hot power and fury of the Emperor behind the hammer, but I can't perfect parry anymore. Like, I need there to be a real huge impetus. Or maybe block innately gives some sort of damage percentage bonus to all weapons. Like, oh, if you use a block weapon, it's a 15% damage bonus or a 20% damage bonus to your melee weapon. Or maybe it helps out with your dodge. It increases your dodge window. Something that makes it so choosing block is a different shift in the spectrum, right? Like, the damage drop off for fencing is always worth it for the extreme defense gain that you get from fencing, because perfect parries do so much. Perfect parry staggers things in an area around you. It auto kills Minoris. It then gives you armor back. It generates gun strikes, which then give you more armor back and can do big amounts of damage. So there's just no reason not to take a fencing weapon. And I think that's a big thing that they can really do here, is make block have some sort of incentive, either again as a damage percentage, an increase on its actual stats, whatever it is. On that same note of kind of going over the retooling of weapons, I definitely think that the perk tree for both class and for weapons needs a rebalance. But when it comes to weapons, I think one of the biggest things is, and I've said this in so many videos, just simply give me another mastery point for completing the relic tree. This kind of goes back to what I was saying. There's no real value to you as the player for progression to level to play with a weapon you've max leveled out, right? If you put that there, if I get a mastery point for completing relic all the way over, then boom, I now get one more point of mastery, which is the true damage of weapons. Perk trees are how they actually do real damage. The difference between a bolt rifle without perks and without perks at level 0 and without perks all the way maxed out is only 3 or 4 damage. It's a massive difference though when you factor in the perk points. So I think the perk trees need love more so than the outright damage of the weapon. Now, to be fair, I have yet to test the new Oculus Bolt Carbine after it got buffed in the most recent patch. But its perk tree is still in shambles. Okay, max spread reduction on dodge, reload faster, penetration. After a finisher, the quick weapon instantly reloads. Okay, I have now spent, after the ones that I just went through, 5 points into this weapon without any real critical improvement to the weapon. Yes, of course, accuracy and spread is going to always be really good on an SMG. I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm not playing Call of Duty where I'm running around hip firing things. I have a 30 round mag. I want to get actual damage out of this bad boy, and I've just spent all the points to really not get. You can go down here, right? But this is damage against terminus level enemies, and this is after a perfectly timed dodge. You deal 25% more damage for 5 seconds. If I'm dodging, I'm probably in melee at that point. You know what I mean? So this is a weapon that is a really good example of it could be a better weapon with simply a perk tree adjustment to have it make sense. Even look at my favorite weapon of the Vanguard, the Instigator Bolt Carbine. I don't even touch the tail end of this. It's not worth it. I just want better headshot damage. I want more rounds in my mag, or ammo reserve in that case. I want to be able to do that. That's kind of a holdover over here. This is a terrible perk for this. I'm not killing things fast enough for this to be valid. These two are really good for the Melta, not so good for an Instigator Bolt Carbine. I've got a finisher, the equipped weapon instantly reloads, okay, whatever. And reload faster, okay, whatever. Reloading time in this game is not super long for me to go, that 10% is going to be the difference. And I guess there's that statement of what the hell does 10% really mean, because we don't know what that time actually is. But I think a perk tree rebalancing would be huge for a lot of the weapons that underperform outside of outright buffs to their damage, of course. Another thing I've brought up in its own video is that I think the character perks need rebalancing as well. And it's mainly because, I know people are going to be like, you didn't buy this perk. Here, I got it, don't worry. I think it's because when I look at some classes, yes, absolutely. Some classes are way better at 25 than they were at level 1, and that should feel like a gradual ramp versus like an on or off switch. Assault is a good example. It's terrible at the lowest level. It's really great at the last level. Same thing with Sniper. Sniper, I think, is an underdog that I even struggle with the Sniper, but I know that that is a personal issue. I just don't like playing that level. I don't like playing like that in this video game, but I know that realistically, you can line this character up to be an absolute monster. But the problem is that there's so many perks in this game, weapon perk or class perk otherwise, that are just no-brainer never picks and no-brainer always picks. Here's an example. There. The bolt carbine reloads 15% faster. Well, okay then. Now I really only have two options here. It's either going to be the las fusel bonus or bolt sniper rifle, stalker bolt rifle. I actually like that, right? If this had something more related to bolt carbines doing something, it would give me a feel that I had three choices for perks that were reliant upon my weapon versus, yeah, this is a no-brainer, and then I'm going to go with this one. And if I'm using a bolt carbine, I'll choose this because it's there, but it's not a great perk. Another good example here too would be for the assault. Any use of jump pack reloads the equipped range weapon. Okay, it's a pistol. It already reloads extremely fast. This is not going to give me a huge benefit. Yep. I saw that wasn't purchased. There's my requisition dump I was talking about, right? Buy the things that I don't want to buy. I mean, even all squad members deal 20% more melee damage against Terminus level enemies. You can barely melee Terminus level enemies. The Neurothrope is like the only real one because it has a stage in which it is susceptible to melee damage. But you can't melee down a Carnifex. I mean, you can get pretty wild with it with Assault, right? But 20% bonus across the whole team? No, I'd rather just all squad members deal 50% more gun strike damage. There are just so many perks for class and for weapons that are just ones that you'll never take. And I think that there needs to be true player choice with these perks. And I'm not asking for stuff that's astronomically broken. This could be something like, all squad members deal 5 or 10% more melee damage against Majoris level enemies. Cool. Now I have to really choose. Do I want the squad members' abilities recharge faster? Do I want more gun strike damage? Or do I want flat damage increase against Majoris? You know, like something where I can actually have true agency on versus, yeah, this is kind of an auto pick. Like, don't get me started here. There's no reason I would never choose this. The Adrenaline Rush. Melee kills of Majoris level or Majoris level or higher enemies restore health by 10%. It's like the best perk in the game, hands down. There's no reason I'm not going to pick it. So I think that there either needs to be a good progression for this, where, okay, yeah, it's the capstone level 25 perk, it makes sense, or they need to feel like they have a good progression point. So a lot of what I've talked about so far, I'm sure will actually get fixed with Prestige. So if Prestige, for those that don't know, we have Prestige coming in Q1 of 2025. And with that, it'll probably be similar to the way it's done in World War Z. Now, I've never played World War Z. This has been relayed to me and I've looked up the information on it. So if I'm wrong here, I apologize. But basically, World War Z allows you to reset your character's level down to 1, but all of their weapon progression stays wherever it was. So this guy can be all the way down to the end of Relic if that's where you've gotten it, but their character jumps back to level 1. Cool. And progressing through the character levels again upgrades and changes the way that the perks are. So your perks become better over time. So this is what I mean, that I think the Prestige system, yes, we do direly need it because I think we should have that cool kind of like new game plus level progression for operations. At least we know it's coming, and it's coming around the same time as Horde mode, so it'll all be a lot of fun. But I think a lot of the stuff I've brought up sounds like it's going to be easily fixed with Prestige. Hey, I don't want to level up. I don't want to level up this weapon. I don't want to do it. I just don't want to do it because I'm level 25 and I don't want to go through this process again. Well, cool. Reset your level to level 1 and you'll go through this process and you'll unlock better character perks that you've talked about, and you can have a true character progression for this character for everything, right? I think that prestige is probably the answer for a lot of this. And if it's been any indicator of the way that they were doing the coherency system, right? The tight formation system for lethal that was in patch 4.0 and dropped in 4.1, they were saying we did that because we have modifiers planned for the game, and this was the first step towards it. So I think that's a system that would have been better with said modifiers, right? Like, okay, tight formations exist, but you get a damage buff. Oh, okay, well, then tight formation's real nice right now. Cool. I think the system as it is, it's presented to us to give us a means to actually have content to do. Like I think had they held back the weapons or whatever it is, it's an interim point in between the actual prestige system coming out. So you can just level these up at your whim. If the prestige system custom comes out, you now level up at level 1. Cool, you can go through this whole process. You have a dump for your weapon data, or for your armory data, and for your requisition, because that is the process. It's unlocked again for you. You can go ahead and go through it. You have to rebuy all your perks, whatever the situation is, but now your perks are upgraded. Again, I think prestige will fix that, but I just don't know when or how that's actually going to factor itself in. And I wanted to bring it up because I think it's probably the kind of answer for everything. Now, outside of that, I think there are two big things that we need to really increase the fun of the melee experience in this game. And the first one is melee needs a flat damage buff. I think every single melee weapon could stand to have a damage buff. I personally hate the combat knife. I know a lot of people love it. We all know my stance on the power fist. I like the power fist over the power sword. It's the way I like to play the game. But I don't think that any one of those weapons, except for the chainsword's just a god, is that much better than the other. And I think that that's a problem, especially because the, what's it called? Not the chainsword. The combat knife is supposed to be the single target damage king. But it doesn't necessarily feel like that. A lot of the time I feel like I'm really taking tons of hits on this thing, and it's a relic weapon, and I'm really whiffing. It doesn't really feel that impactful. I think the only one that really feels truly impactful for me is the chainsword, because it's just so damn reliable. The power sword needs to be at relic. The power fist needs to be at relic. The thunderhammer needs to be at relic. And even the thunderhammer doesn't feel like it's leaps and bounds that much better than just the chainsword. I think what makes the Thunderhammer so much better is, of course, its weapon perks that allow me to do its double smashes and stuff, and the fact that I'm using it on an assault, which gets a ground pound, which does do amplified damage. So I think that there needs to be an increase in the damage across the board for melee weapons, especially when you take a look. That damage doesn't need to be a flat damage buff across the board for the game. It could be relegated to specific difficulties. If you really wanted to do that, I think just doing a flat damage buff is probably easier to balance, but maybe it's like, okay, lethal's got like a 15% damage buff to melee, because the reality is the higher the difficulty, the more you're going to spend in melee combat. And I think as a result, melee combat is very punishing, because you can't wade through the entire horde using ranged when you have only one class that is truly dedicated. Well, I guess really two classes that are truly dedicated to clearing waves of monsters in the tactical and the heavy. Well, I guess maybe third with the Vanguard and its Melta, but still, that's the only weapon in the Vanguard's arsenal that allows it, right? Everything else is either going to be strong single target damage, melee defensive, whatever it is. The heavy's got a heavy bolt gun, that's meant to chunk apart Tyranids. But man, the Bulwark's just meant to kind of hold the line here. So I think giving them some sort of actual capability to truly contend in melee is a good step for the game. And second to that point is that there needs to be a different sound cue for a dodge attack. And what I mean by a dodge attack is the red indicator that it is an unparryable attack. So I think that's a big issue that I have right now. Humans respond to sound cues faster than we do visual. It's why sprinters hear a gunshot before they go. It's why professional F1 racers see lights and then a different sound cue and light that tells them to go. They respond to the sound cue faster and better than the visual. So right now, if the red indicator comes up that it is an unparryable attack, it is the same sound cue as a blue indicator of a parryable attack or an off-screen gaunt attack. Changing that would make my life so much better. And I know it's a skill issue. I get it. I see the red and I just immediately go to parry because that's a me problem. But it's a me problem that enough people are sharing that I think could simply be alleviated by just having a slightly different sound cue. It's like my ultimate issue with the game right now, because I could be flying through a lethal. I could be crushing and rushing. And then that sound cue hits me. I do a parry. I just got chunked in the face by a Tyranid warrior, and it stunned me, and I just got dumpstered. And it's a thing that I need to get better at. But if enough people are telling me too, hey, yeah, that sound cue is the thing that messes me up, it's not so much the visual, maybe I'm on point. Maybe I got something. Maybe I'm going somewhere. I'm not going to be a professional F1 racer. Maybe Lando Norris is never going to win a cup. Who knows? But my point remains, changing that sound cue, I think, would be an amazing step. The last thing before we pivot into PvP is server stability. I brought this up in my last video talking about, the difficulty with Ruthless and with Substantial. And one of the biggest things with the difficulty is when you're queuing up with randos, that you just spend so much time in this just never-ending black screen where it says loading and loading and loading and loading and loading, and it's 2.5 minutes. I stayed there for 2.5 minutes for the scientific experiment of seeing how long it would take to push me through, and it pushed me through. Some people don't have that kind of time. If every single match you jump into is a chance that you're waiting for 2.5, maybe 3 minutes for it to go through, and it still drops you, that's very frustrating. I think that is one of the biggest things I've seen commented on my videos or talked about on Reddit, is every 5th or 6th post seems to be about continued connection issues. Now, I know that the game operates on a peer-to-peer fashion when it comes to operations, but I don't know how the handshake works. In between all that, I barely know how to microwave ramen. But my point remains here that figuring out whatever that problem is, I think is crucial for the longevity of the game's health. Outside of all the things I've mentioned, outside of anything about difficulty or content or whatever, but the biggest problem is if people can't actually access and play the game, they're going to get frustrated. They're going to leave. They're going to go play anything else that they can actually drop in and drop out of, especially the way that most gamers tend to skew towards the older spectrum older spectrum. Jesus Christ, I'm 36. I feel like I'm like in a retirement home, but they skew towards a spectrum that they don't have enough time that they used to plug in hours and hours and hours away. And having that time robbed of them via disconnects, loading screens, game crashes, those are very frustrating pain points that can push people away from a game permanently. And on the point of longevity, let's talk about PvP. PvP only has a small window to, I think, be truly successful in a game. After that window, people leave that game to go on to other PvP horizons, whatever it is. We know that there are PvP conventions or improvements coming. They're all coming in Q1. And I think that's fine. I think there's enough PvE stuff that they really need to work out or add operations and blah, 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 blah. But I think just simply adding one PvP map would be huge for the health of the PvP in the long term, because it's just simply one map. You could even just throw it on the public test server, have people play around with that map, basically use the current PvP population to see how it's going, and then put it live. But as it is, there's only 2. And you can make as many statements as you want about it, only being 6v6, needs to be 12v12, or more players in general. I think that a lot of what I've talked about in this video, I tried to say, like, okay, what are small things that we could ask for that don't require massive patching to get to? Like sound cue, that's an easy change. Rebalancing a class perk, that is an easy change. Giving some sort of bonus to block items, an easy change. Changing the infrastructure of the way PvP interacts, that's going to take some time. So I think whatever things happen post the PvP season that's coming for us in Q1 or Q2, whatever one it is in 2025, we'll have to see how that really shakes out. But I think in the interim, the chaos voice thing still needs to be helped because it sounds real funkopotamus right now. And the map, we just need one more map to keep people invested in the PvP so it doesn't just become a top level sweat fest of only the people that are left. Now, another big portion of PvP is also a lot of desync issues that's causing people to drop parries, drop attacks, get killed from around corners, stuff like that. And those are all server-side issues that I would hope would get resolved with the connectivity issues in operation. So I think the last point and this point do share hand in hand, that they do have some connectivity issues that is causing issues with the long-term portions of the game. But at that, it brings my video here to a close. So again, I try to talk about things in this video that weren't big. Yeah, of course, I want more operations. I want more weapons. I want more cosmetics. Of course I do. I love this game. I've got over 200 hours in it. I want more of all the things that I like. But thinking about simple things that could easily be squeezed into balance patches or interim patches in between major content drops was really the scope and the focus of this video, because it's easy to ask for more things like content and get those things and have things like this fall between the cracks, because things like this fall between the cracks then the more content that gets added, it's still the glaring issue. You just have a shiny thing in front of you for a little bit that distracts from the bigger issues that are taking away from your fun of long-term enjoyment of the game. And that's what this video is really more geared towards, is how can we keep Space Marine 2 a game that has a healthy population for the next couple years versus a game that drops down to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people in population. It's hard to find games and so on and so forth. Space Marine 1 had a pretty wild life cycle of having a pretty good resurgence with its PvP. That's probably in part to Chapter Master Valric. I don't know. They know the stats, not me. But my point remains here, though, that any kind of things like this give just a little bit of a quality of life bump to keep people invested. And maybe it's only 15 or 20 or 30 people, but hopefully that compounds as some of these things get added or changed or fixed or modified, or prestige classes get added to the game, whatever it is. But go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. I know that developers look at Reddits, they look at forums, they watch content creators, they read the comments. What are some of the things that you would like added to the game that are not massive? Yes, I want to change the lenses on the helmets for my Marines. It looks like that's already coming to the game because there's a helmet in the game that you can't actually access yet. So it looks like that's on the horizon. They've already said that it's coming. But what are some other things that are small that you would like to see changed or modified? Maybe it's, hey, you know what? Here's something small. I want all of the final weapon perks to actually be worthwhile. So I have to decide, do I go all the way down one weapon perk line, or do I branch off and not get that capstone perk but choose other ones instead? Maybe it's a little change like that. Stuff that balanced patches could definitely be a part of, whatever it is. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.